From WHYY, it is Hittin season. Hey there, podcast pals. I'm John Stolnis from The Good Fight. You can follow me on X and Blue Sky at John Stolnis. Coming up, we're going to wrap up this Phil's Mets series here as we record the roundtable episode of the podcast on a Monday night. Big series win against the Mets. An emotional lift for this team after getting swept by the Mets in New York back in April. The Phillies do the job against a struggling Mets team, a Mets team that is having a hard time right now, and geez, it just breaks your heart to see it happen. Joining me to talk about the series, some of the heroes, some of the big stories, and how we're feeling about this team right now, Liz Roscher and Justin Klugh. Liz, of course, is with the Sabre Baseball Research Journal. Follow her on X and Blue Sky at Liz Roscher. Liz, fun time this weekend at Citizens Bank Park, and for our tailgate on Saturday afternoon before the game, we were out in the Jetro lot meeting people. It was a good time.
It was a wonderful time. Thanks to everybody who came by and for everyone who didn't get a chance to, because we only started advertising this maybe 4 days before it took place. We're going to try better next time.
Yeah, that's on us.
You'll be able to put it on your calendar, and maybe we'll even get a little map with Jetro marked on it, because I had more than one person ask me, where is Jetro? Not everybody, not all of us got drunk there in the 2010s, watched people punch other people for fun.
Whoa. Watch.
I know. That's right. That's right. Justin Klugh from Baseball Prospectus. Follow him on Blue Sky at Justin Klugh. Yeah, Justin, a good time meeting some folks. A good turnout. We had a good time talking with people, and on the WHYY Instagram at some point here soon, there'll be a video of our meetup and some of the folks that we met. But it was a real great time getting to see everybody ahead of the only bad baseball game they played this weekend.
Yeah, if anybody watching that video when it pops up, I assure you, as sweaty as it looks, it was much sweatier.
Oh yeah,
in direct sunlight for several hours. John, would you confirm a theory I think I have in that ever since the debut of the Phillies City Connect jerseys, which they, of course, wore again in the Friday home game, your opinion of them has only gotten higher, whereas mine has gotten lower, and we are now further apart than ever before.
Yeah.
And it's causing some real problems for
it's a wedge.
For the show.
It's a wedge issue for us. There's no doubt.
Okay. Yeah.
I do like them now. I think they're okay.
Wow.
I've warmed to them quite a bit. I didn't like them at all, and I do feel like, even the fact that I like them now, I'm wearing one right now. Obviously, I wear this because it's really comfortable. It doesn't feel like a jersey. It doesn't like hang on. It feels like something I could actually, wear in public and not look weird wearing it. But I do like the color. I think especially when you wear it with the hat and the full ensemble uniform that the Phillies wear. I'm kind of digging it now. I don't dislike it. Matter of fact, I actually like it now. I do think they could have done better. They could have gone in a different way. We've talked about a lot of the ways that they could have done the City Connect jersey a little bit better, but all in all, as far as just like an alternate jersey look, if you take kind of City Connect out of it as an alternate jersey, I think it works.
Yeah, I'm
no
gonna
one
have to
agrees
go ahead
with me.
and disagree with you on that one, John.
Strongly.
But I was saddened to have my theory correct. When I saw your image popped up wearing that jersey again, I was like, oh, that's right. He's like very into these. Whereas
That's very into. Let's
own one. I don't know anybody else who owns one. Now, granted, yes, I think what happened was exactly what I thought would happen, was that there was just sort of this sense of ownership claimed to them, and now you see people wearing them. I don't know if do they go out of their way to wear them on Friday nights? What's the lore around the City Connects, John? What's the subculture like? You go to the meetings.
Well, from deep in our cave, we emerge from our monthly meetings.
Obviously, it's a cave, yeah.
Yeah, and we emerge from our monthly meetings where we eat raw meat and sacrifice small turtles to whatever
It's like a
City Connect god there is.
episode.
Yeah, we haven't even gotten started talking about the series.
No,
yet, so,
we're fine.
We're a good 3 minutes into this podcast, and it's already gone off the rails. But
This is what the people want.
this is what the people
We
said
heard
that they
this
want.
from the people, several
right.
of them.
That's right. Well, let's if we could veer off this topic and get to the matter at hand, and that is the Phillies in first place by themselves here as we're recording on Monday night, 47-31 with an off day on Monday after taking 2 of 3 from the Mets at Citizens Bank Park. After getting swept in late April, they took 2 out of 3. So a 10-2 win on Friday, an 11-4 loss on Saturday, and then of course the 7-1 win on Sunday Night Baseball. That was a whole lot of fun. Here's the sports talk radio question of the podcast, Justin and Liz. And if nothing else, we love to roll up our sleeves and do what the sports talk radio stations would do. Justin, Klugh, are you now back all in on the Phillies?
I'm right where I need to be with this team.
That's very
that is, no one
free-eyed
knows,
of you,
but
they know
Justin.
what that
that
means.
comment. Yeah.
I know how to watch this team now. I feel like that we complained about that maybe a month ago. You're still learning, like, what kind of team is this? What are we looking at? And, it's a different version of the same kind of team we've been watching. We've now seen them play very well, sink to the bottom, and then kind of play their way out of it, and are playing better now. So we've kind of seen both ends of what this team looks like when they're playing at their best and when they're playing some of their worst baseball of the season. So I feel like I have a general understanding of what this team looks like when it does either, and how susceptible they are to the kind of X factors that can break you without it even being your fault. So I feel like with a more comprehensive sense of this team, it's a lot more comfortable watching them. And playing the Mets is a great way to do that, especially right now. We're going to get into it in a little bit here, but this series, it's only 3 games. It's part of a much longer series throughout the season, even just with the Mets. But still, it tells you a lot about this team having to play the Mets now, with the Mets in the shape that they're in, and the Phillies still trying to play their way back into being like this team with momentum and hot. That's like beating good teams, which they are. They clearly are. So yeah. I feel like we've seen enough of this team to know, it really is going to come down for them and the Mets. Who's playing well when the time comes. They can both play really well and they can both bottom out. So you just got to hope that that's not the part of the wheel that you land on when September gets here. It's kind of where we are. So I think I, like a lot of people, know how to watch this team better. So I'm right where I need to be.
Liz, you share that general sense of our fandom right now as far as where we are with the Phillies? I mean, because I know some people just, they ride those waves and, I don't know. I mean, it's a great series win, but I'd see that a lot. Are we back all in? It's like, I wasn't ever out.
That was my main reaction to reading this question. I'm just like, who was out? None of
lots
us
of people say they were. You've seen them on the socials.
People talk big on social media. We all know this. People talk big on social media because it's more fun to veer to the extremes on social media than it is to be like, no, this team, we know how to watch this team now. That's a sane answer. That is not what the internet is for. What the internet is for is for extreme points of view. But I think Justin's right. We all know how to watch this team better. We know who they are. Not that we didn't know before, but the more they have, low spells and the more they play themselves out of it, the more confident we feel that they have the continued ability to do that. Right. And I think that's something early in this season we had no idea about. Now we're, slowly approaching the midpoint, actually in just a couple of weeks, the midpoint of the season. And, now we know they can play themselves out of this, but sometimes they need time. And if they get on, just as Justin said, if they get on a, losing 9 of 10 jag at the wrong time, whether it's in September or in the playoffs, they might not have enough time to play themselves out of it. But, that's a September problem.
Right. Right now,
and honestly, winning or losing bunches like that, I really think this team's got another losing 10 out of 12 kind of stretch them somewhere in this season. There's that. I think that is almost assuredly going to happen again once. And it's just going to be about the timing of that particular rough stretch. But again, that's just talking. Now we're forecasting future bummers. But right now, winning this series this weekend really meant that I don't think they officially formally changed the narrative that's between them and the Mets right now. But they did. They got a foothold in being able to do that next time based on how the next series with the Mets goes. Because the Mets have been pretty much in control for a couple of times now.
Right, and I think that's my takeaway from this series is I was never not all in on the Phil. I'm not all in, all out, right? I said it last week. This is a really good baseball team that is going to play really poorly at times. It's going to play really well at times. If they'd lost 2 out of 3 to the Mets, I would not have been stressing a whole lot, because they're just as likely to then win 10 out of 12, and then they might lose 6 out of 10, we look at a team like the Mets. they're going through a really rough patch right now. Does that mean we all think the Mets are terrible and they're not going to make the playoffs? Of course not.
No, but you also don't want to be the reason the Mets get hot while also staying bad against them.
Right. You want to make sure they continue to play poorly when they come into your city and they're riding a long losing streak. And it's absolutely true. They've lost 8 of 9 as they're playing the Braves right now and losing in the 8th inning. So, they're in a bad way right now, like the Phillies were 3 weeks ago when they were in a bad way. And that's just how the ebbs and flows of a 162-game season go. I think what I will say about this series is that I think it would have been more damaging to the Phillies psychologically if they'd lost to the Mets in this series, and if they'd played like they did in the previous series where they're not scoring many runs. The Mets starters are kind of making the bats look feeble. The pitching is walking guys, and you had more nights like Saturday night, was they on Friday or Sunday or something. You lose Saturday night and Sunday night on national television to the Mets. I think that would have been a tough pill to swallow. I don't think that means that their season was doomed, or that you should be out on the Phillies, or that the Mets that the Phillies are incapable of beating the New York Mets. But winning the series eliminates that for now. It allows the Phillies to stop and say, we know we can beat this team. We actually blew them out twice in this series, and they blew us out once too. But the Mets have flaws just like the Phillies do. And if you get them in Citizens Bank Park, you have a really good chance of beating them. And then you got some work to do in New York if you end up playing them in Citi Field, which they will later in the season. So, I don't know, Liz. I mean, I think that's kind of... I looked at it. It would have been kind of a more of a negative if they'd lost the series, and heaven forbid they'd have gotten swept. But that doesn't mean I'd have been out. But it certainly would have, I think, led you to question that, man, this team really does have their number. And I don't feel like the Mets have the Phillies' number. Not right now. They don't.
Yeah, I think that's entirely true and reasonable. I think that the taking 2 of 3 from the Mets means that they don't even have to really think about this series now that it's over. They won 2 of 3. They don't have to, there's no rending of the garments and gnashing of teeth about whatever happened. They can look back at game 2 and realize, oh, crap, that wasn't fun. But that wasn't, that was a bad Mick Abel start that got out of control down the line.
Right. And the poo-poo platter relievers, that's what that game was going to be,
Yes, and so I think it enables them to just continue to move on and to just not dwell on that. And if they had to have dwelled on that, then it would have led them back to that first series, where they got swept. And I think it's just a good thing to keep the train moving. That's the most important thing with the Phillies. They have to keep the train moving and keep their minds moving forward. That's why losing streaks, I think, are so difficult for them, because they are very much live in the moment type of guys. And if things are going bad at the moment, everything is bad. So now they can just move on to their series with Houston and not think about what happened with the Mets, because they beat them 2 out of 3.
I think this series was probably a win before they won Game 3, because as far as I know, they didn't let a Mets fan throw out the first pitch this time.
Truth.
There's still time. There's
So at least there's that. But yeah, I mean, we're all citing all this success the Mets have had over the Phillies. We know they beat them 14 out of 19 times in 2022, but the Phillies, they won the season series against the Mets in 23 and 24, but just like barely both times. They went 7-6 against them, and I'm not counting the playoff series, which was briefly tied, but never really felt like the Mets weren't winning or totally in control. So obviously, we all know the Mets swept them earlier this season. So, John, I pretty much am just agreeing with every point you've made, that I think breaking that cycle and being able to look back and say, okay, we objectively defeated the Mets this weekend. There's no taking away from that. And honestly, if Suarez or Sanchez was starting that Saturday game, they probably win it. Like, I think that really does come down to a bad Mick Abel start anyway. So I think what was gained from this series was the Phillies getting that confidence of twice pretty handedly beating a first-place team. None of these games were close. So it was nice to be able to say when the Phillies won 2 of them that they did so very decidedly, and it wasn't like luck or a weird play or a bad bounce that got them those wins. Those were very definitive wins, and they prolonged the Mets' longest rough patch of the season so far. So as far as like it being a statement, I think it's good for them mentally, and it was obviously the thing we needed to happen after that bad Saturday loss. But what they didn't do was sweep them. And even that would have only been a small pushback at a team that's been bullying the Phillies since the playoffs last year. But still, they're not all the way back out of this Mets kind of hangover thing yet, but this was just a good opportunity to sort of pivot away from that, maintain the success they've had, and keep the Mets, keep them down in the hole. So I think this was a really healthy series. It could have gone better, but I'm totally satisfied with how things turned out.
With the way the Mets are playing right now, what do we make of them? Is this a team that was overachieving early in the season with a starting rotation that had incredible numbers, but the names didn't really match the numbers in a lot of cases? Now they've had
Sound
some
like
injuries.
a Mets fan right now.
Yeah. Well, and they're going to get Sean Manaea back here pretty soon. It sounds like he's in the minors doing a rehab and looking pretty good. So he'll be back. We'll see if he can pick up where he left off last year. But, I mean, they've got Tyler McGill, who's on the injured list. They have Kodai Senga, who's going to be coming back from injury at some point. But right now, this is a Mets team that has a lot of problems. We saw this weekend they're very top-heavy with their lineup. And when those five guys are hitting, like they did on Saturday night, they can be a really dangerous offense. But there are outs to be had in that lineup. If you can kind of navigate your way through the top five, the bottom four in that lineup is it's kind of a black hole at the moment. They've got real problems at third base. They've got some issues in the bullpen as well. But really, the starting rotation is not keeping them in games at the moment. And so they're having a real rough time. And that's kind of why this weekend it didn't feel like the Mets team that we had been worrying about, right? You knew they were coming in and they were scuffling. And I think if the Phillies had lost that series or gotten swept by a Mets team that was scuffling coming into the series, that might have said more to me than anything else. Like, here's a team that was really playing poorly, Justin, and you let them come in here and get well. And I think that's kind of the point you were kind of getting at there a second ago.
Well, I think you were also getting at it before I was getting at it, and you're just articulating my own thoughts much better than I am tonight, so thank you for that. But the Mets are kind of what I hoped. After they've been playing so well to start the year, you start wondering, okay, when's there going to be a hole? When's there going to be a way in here? And finally, we started seeing that as they've lost 8 of 9. And hopefully, again, tonight they make that stretch last even longer. So they're good but flawed, like the Phillies. They both have soft bullpens right now. In fact, this series, the Phillies and Mets bullpens both had ERAs of 7.30.
Whoa.
Exactly.
Wow.
The exact same ERAs, and they're both bad.
That's
the
wild.
The Mets bullpen gave up more hits in this series, but the Phillies bullpen gave up 6 home runs, while the Phillies only hit 1 home run off the Mets bullpen, which is indicative of other issues we're going to talk about in a minute here. But their parallels increase the odds that things will come down to luck between these teams. Like both teams will look really good, and they'll both lose in bunches. It really just depends on who's doing what in September. But it doesn't seem likely that they'll both be playing with their hair on fire at the same time, throughout the season. But the Phillies got to take advantage of the Mets' lousiest stretch of the year so far, and it's gone on long enough for the Mets to notice too. So that's kind of like an important milestone in this Mets downward spiral is, they're starting to make some adjustments because of things being more than just, a couple of bad games. They demoted Francisco Alvarez and Luis Angel Acuna. They don't really have an answer at catcher. And coming into tonight against the game in the game against the Braves, the rotation had a 6.55 ERA its last cycle through. And the Phillies getting to David Peterson in this series was also a huge deal in that he's been having an incredible year, and that the Phillies were able to not be unnerved by that in the finale was also huge and indicative that, this team, what's been working for this team is not working right now. So, like I said, they've lost 8 of their last 9, 5 of 6 on this road trip against the Phillies and Braves, and now they're playing the Braves again for 4 games, who just swept them. According to the New York Post, the Mets had won the last 28 games in which Francisco Lindor had homered until Sunday, when he threw one up there in garbage time. Their third baseman, like John said, it's not a great position for them. He's rehabbing in the minors, so they got a gaping hole out there for now in Brett Beatty and a guy who's kind of the same thing as Brett Beatty, but not as good. Kodai Senga, it was a big deal that he was throwing today. So, he's coming back, but who knows, exactly when that is. They do have a line of pitchers kind of coming back between now and mid-July, but they're not here right now. They're short on pitching. Frankie Montas will be back soon. Sean Manaea will be back soon. Tyler McGill is coming back later in July, but they're without these guys right now. So now is the time to kind of capitalize on them being this very vulnerable team. If they were winning now, to put it a different way, with the shortages they have, they would be unstoppable. But now they've got this crazy 1 through 5 in their batting order, and outside of that, there's a lot of pitching that's waiting to come back. And like John just said, the bottom of their order is just not good. Like they just demoted the catcher who was playing against the Phillies in that part of that order over the weekend. So right now, nobody's panicking, I think, for the Mets, but they do have like a subset of fans asking, what if this is the real version of this team? Which I don't think is true, but it's just good to know they're feeling the same things that Phillies fans were feeling a little earlier this year.
Yeah. And I think that's the point I want Phillies fans to understand is that every other team, even the Dodgers, with all the pitching injuries that they're going through right now, have issues. There are no locks in Major League Baseball, so it's just riding it out. Try to win as many games between now and October to put yourself in the best position as possible, and understand, we just watched with the Phillies. They go up by 4 games on the Mets, and then all of a sudden they were down by 5.5, and now they're back up in front in first place, and all that happened within about a month's time. So it can change really, really quickly, especially now as it looks like we're looking at a 2-team race in the National League East between the Phillies and the Mets. I guess, Liz, let me ask you that question. Is this a 2-team race? Is there a chance that the Braves get back into this thing? Or is this going to just be a neck-and-neck battle between the Phillies and the Mets throughout the rest of the summer?
Let me see. How far back? Oh, my. Okay. So
yes,
they're back
it's my games back. That's how far back they are.
Yeah, I mean, it's not as bad
11
as...
back.
Yeah, it's not quite as bad as the Nats or the Marlins, who are 15 games back. 11 is still far, but... As we've seen, the Phillies have swung themselves, and the Mets have swung themselves quite a bit. You just said they were up on the Mets by a handful of games, and then they were down by like 5.5 games, and now they're back just over. And if you look at that swing, that is about, 8-9 games?
Yeah.
And so I would love to call it a 2-team race and for that to be true 100%. But I don't think it is. I'm still not convinced that the Braves won't find a way back because I'll never stop being scared of them. For a weird reason, the Mets just don't scare me anymore. Like, we've seen the worst, we've seen the best. I personally believe that the fan bases are too similar to ever get along.
Yeah.
We're all experiencing the same things, only at slightly different times. So, I mean, I would love it if the Mets could stumble and continue to stumble, but that would mean the Braves would have an opening. And how much do we want the Braves to find their footing?
I don't know. Weren't the Braves figuring it out a couple of weeks ago and turning the corner, and they're still 6 games under 500? I don't know. I think I'm crediting them with a little bit of snake bittenness that I think is contributing to this. I think it's just kind of their time to have a season like this, and I've already said a couple of times that they're done. I don't know. I can feel that coming back to bite me, but at the same time, how often do these 3-team races really materialize in the NL East? I mean, this specific 3-team race, we keep expecting it, and for all 3 of these teams to be good at the same time and competitive at the same time, playing the same sport with the same X factors and the same injury risks. I mean, it feels like it's just their turn to be a team that's just not getting the breaks they need. They lost Chris Sale. I mean, that's...
Yeah. Well, that's the thing I was going to say.
Substantial.
Yeah.
It is.
Chris Sale for an undetermined amount of time. It's not 10 days. Like, you break a rib as a pitcher. I mean, look at Aaron Nola. He has a stress reaction in a rib, and he's going to miss a month, if not a little bit more, because of that.
The Braves don't have the starting rotation depth that the Phillies have.
No.
Right. Exactly.
Did you guys see how Sale broke his rib?
He was diving for a ball.
He was diving for a catch off the mound. The next time I hear one of the broadcasters complain about Ranger Suarez looking a little too casual about fielding his position, I want to say the dude slow walks it for a reason. He doesn't want to get tangled up and injured.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, it could come off as being, too casual and too blasé, but it's not like he's lazy out there. He is turning around and being like, oh, there's the ball. Let me pick it up with a good grip and then throw it as fast as I can directly at the glove. There's no slipping. There's no falling. And I think if that is what was required, he might not do it because it's going to be that close of a play. Why risk yourself?
Right.
And I applaud him for that because I don't want to lose a pitcher like Ranger Suarez to kind of a hilarious looking injury.
I don't think he does it for health security. I think he does it because he's the coolest pitcher in baseball.
He
frankly.
barely has a pulse.
I love it.
If there are health benefits to that, then great. But I think it's just because he's
Yeah, it could
That's right,
just
they're
be a
ancillary.
benefit of
Cool
his
as hell.
attitude, but I'm still a fan of it and will encourage him to continue doing it because it is the best. It's how things should go for him.
Braves 7 games out of a wild card, and they've been 7-3 in their last 10. So I mean, it's a mountain, and that's the thing is like in this wild card era with all the good teams in the National League West, they're not just trying to catch the Braves and the Phillies. They're also trying to catch the Giants and the Padres or the Dodgers and the Diamondbacks and any other team in the Central that makes a run. I think most of the other teams have kind of the Cardinals and Brewers, but right now they're ahead of the Braves too. So I mean, there's a lot of teams that the Braves would have to leapfrog, and like you said, they lost their second best pitcher in Chris Sale for a good amount of time. Michael Harris and Ozzie Albies can no longer hit. They can't hit anymore. Like they've lost the ability. It's been 2 seasons now that these guys, and Albies it's because of injury. Harris just because he's forgotten how to do it. I will say, last year all 3 teams made the playoffs. It's kind of hard to remember that the Braves did make the playoffs last year. So it wasn't really a 3-team race because the Phillies kind of pulled away, but it was obviously the Braves and Mets were playing it down to the wire for wild card spots in the last day of the season. And then in 2022, both the Braves and Mets won 100 more games. The Phillies were that third wild card team in, and then of course they went on to the World Series, and the Braves and Mets went out early. So it happens, but I agree, it's not going to happen with the Braves here in 2025. They're cooked. They're done. I'm calling it here on June 23rd. It's over.
From your mouth to the ears of the divine.
That's right. Let's get into some of the specifics about the series against the Mets a little bit. Jesus Luzardo was amazing on Sunday Night Baseball. 6 2/3, 3 hits, no runs, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts. Kind of cool after the game talking about knowing it was on Sunday Night Baseball, knowing it was against the Mets. He's a red light pitcher, I think. He knows when the camera is going to be on, when the audience is going to be its largest. He knew that it was so important that he pitch well, that they get a win here, a series win on Sunday Night Baseball, and the way just shutting that lineup down after a night in which they hit 7 home runs, Justin, it was a big deal for him to come out and do that, especially because he hasn't looked too solid lately. He's had, more rocky starts than great starts. It was a relief to see him pitch as well as he did, and encouraging on the stage that he did it on.
Yep, pick your narrative, really. You could get on the Jesus Luzardo continued comeback narrative. You could do the Phillies climbing into first place in the NL East narrative, the Phillies shaking the Mets monkey off their back narrative. I mean, this game, if you wanted it to be, this game was pretty big. And I said early that you'd know pretty quick if Luzardo had it or not, and pretty much the whole game was going to hinge on that, and the whole weekend was kind of going to depend on that game. So it also came down to the Phillies being able to hit David Peterson, but let's say assuming they're going to squeeze out maybe a couple of runs against him or the bullpen, Luzardo's going to at best need to make a small lead stand up. Well, fortunately they both came through for each other. The Phillies gave him that 5-run cushion really easily against a pitcher who's been absolutely dominant this year, which I did not necessarily see happening. I thought this was going to really be a Luzardo effort, and it was, but I thought he was going to have to drag a much heavier anchor around his neck for most of that game.
And Peterson has owned the Phillies over the years too.
Absolutely. So it was great to see Luzardo. Even when the Mets showed their teeth, he didn't flinch. He just kept hammering the zone with great velocity, and the Mets just never found a way in. And more, I despite how encouraging this start was, and in line with the rest of his starts since that little rough patch, it is starting to feel like more and more, given how far he's blasted past his innings total from last year, that he is the lefty you put in the bullpen in October. But I'm at this point still, for mental health reasons, not thinking that far ahead.
There was a great moment Sunday night when he struck out Juan Soto. It was later in the game, and the broadcasters had been talking about how over time Soto and Real Muto have sort of a progressive chat as the night goes along. They sort of joke with each other. They have a good time. So you saw them before the at-bat started, talking with each other and smiling, and Luzardo blew Soto away with a fastball to strike him out, and you just saw Soto standing there. He dropped the bat and he smiled and shook his head and looked back at Real Muto. You could see who was sort of laughing as he ran off. I'm just just a moment that sort of encapsulated everything, because Luzardo is staring daggers. I don't believe he was smiling, but I'm sure he understood the joke. I just love that moment, of Soto being like, oh, I guess I'm not. I guess he's going to give me more of those pitches. I might have to swing at them.
And a really underrated part of that game on Sunday night was the Kyle Schwarber solo home run. I mean, I know that was just the first run. Edmundo Sosa's 3-run shot was really the big blow in that inning, but it was kind of like it broke the seal on David Peterson. And left on left, I mean, Schwarber has really had a hard time with David Peterson over the years, and Schwarber's been struggling in the month of June, but he has come up with some big home runs here in the month of June. Those hits that he's been getting, they've been home runs at really important times. And on Sunday Night Baseball, I think the Schwarber home run just allowed everyone to relax. Everyone exhaled a little bit. And then the offense started doing what they've been doing more of this year, which is not relying on the home run. Phillies scored 21 runs this weekend. Only 3 of them were by the home run. I did a little bit of number crunching for The Good Fight, an article I wrote on Monday, looking into this. And really what you see with this Phillies offense is a higher walk rate, a lower strikeout rate. They're going to the opposite field more. They're going up the middle more. The percentages for all those numbers have improved over last year. The exit velocity is largely about still the same. They're hitting more ground balls, so they're not elevating the ball quite as much, but in a season in which it looks like there's more drag on the baseball, maybe that's for the best. But what I think you are seeing, and Matt Gelb had a really good article in The Athletic about this, was an at-bat by JT Realmuto in that game, Justin, where there was an opportunity. He gets 2-2 in the count, and it looks like, in previous at-bats, in previous seasons, JT Realmuto goes fishing out of the strike zone to try and make something happen. And in this case, he didn't do it. Like, this team has had a better sense of knowing the strike zone, taking what the pitcher gives them. I think in Matt's article, he mentioned the words bearing down more on every particular pitch, every particular at-bat. And I think this is a more sustainable form of offense in October. Like, power wins in October, we all know that, but we also know that can be, with this team, turned off like a spigot. And if you're continuing to have good at-bats, grind out starting pitchers, get your walks, go the other way with the ball, when you do get those home runs, they're more likely to be with guys on base rather than just like 4 solo home runs like we saw the Mets do on Saturday night.
Is this not what everybody said they wanted in the offseason?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Was this not the entire offseason?
Yeah.
That they looked
Yes,
like
it was.
clueless jabronis against the Mets in the NLDS because they had no plate discipline? And Jurickson Profar was going to come here and be so good at doing that they'd all start doing it for some reason. But then they didn't really make any roster move to try and impact the plate approaches of 8 other individual starting players because that's not super possible anyway. And then they decided to just be the Phillies who hit home runs and chase sliders. But then the season started and the whiff rates were really down and the Phillies looked pretty half decent at plate discipline. So how about that? After all that talk about how hard it is to adjust as a veteran with a routine and all these thoughts, the Phillies just sort of did that. And now they're in first place. I think they could hit for more power. Schwarber's got some more homers to hit. Harper will be back soon. Some rando will get totally hot. Matt Gelb says he thinks they'll get a high-leverage reliever and an outfield bat at the trade deadline, and maybe that guy is going to come here and hit for a ton of power because that's what they need. But just because they're just because they're not pushing that button doesn't mean they aren't winning the games. Win now without power? Cool. Win later with it? Sweet. Dramatic. Fun. Just not get enough runs to win. And if you're somebody who was out on this team when they lost 10-12, then I have no idea how you're sitting around criticizing the kinds of wins that they are now achieving.
For anybody who's not watching this on video, there were moments during this small rant that I was afraid that Justin's eyes were going to pop out of his head and roll
These
away.
new lights. I have new lights now.
Yes, you do.
Putting a lot of emphasis on the old
peepers.
oculars.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it takes some getting used to. I've got a couple of lights in front of me, and like the first month is yeah, Liz. I mean, I think this offense, it's more balanced. I do think power will come too. I mean, you haven't had Bryce Harper for about a month. It is weird that here in late June, Kyle Schwarber is the only member of the Phillies with double-digit home runs.
Oh, I didn't know that. I hadn't looked in a little while. That's a little concerning.
It is a little concerning. Listen, truth be told, it's a little concerning.
I'm not setting up the emergency broadcast
First
or
place.
anything, but
right, but first place. And here's the thing: runs per game, 1/10 of a run fewer here in 2025 than in 2024. It's when they had so much more power. I think it was 4.7 last year. It's 4.6 this year. So no big difference, right? I mean, and I just don't feel like we've seen. There have been a couple stretches this year, Liz, where there have been, a few droughts here and there. But it doesn't seem to me like it's been an all or nothing offense. And I think with a starting rotation that is the strength and generally does a good job holding things down, I just feel like this team has been much tougher on starting pitchers this year.
I totally agree. I think when I hear that the Phillies have hit so few home runs comparatively, my instinct is to not connect that to their actual record and be incredibly concerned, because you've got players hitting lots of home runs still. There are other teams that are having issues, but there's still a handful of players hitting a lot of home runs, and Kyle Schwarber is sort of on the edge of being one of those. But as Justin said, you look at their record and you look at the actual specifics of the games, and they're scoring runs in a lot of different ways. They're hitting balls to the outfield, to the infield. They're hitting opposite. Like, they're actually playing baseball. They're taking the baseball and doing more than just hitting it out of the park. And I know that was a concern we had last year and the year before, and even somewhat in 22, that they were very homer reliant. And if the ball does have more drag this year, and if that has caused some of the hits that might have been home runs to fall into the outfield, I still think that's a really good thing. Because as long as the balls aren't caught, you have a chance to score a run. And that is, in the end, the most important thing. Like, putting the ball in play is the game. That's the whole game. You have to put it in play. And seeing the plate discipline that the Phillies have had this year, combined with the fact that they have had to score runs in other ways, is really encouraging.
If they were winning and not hitting home runs, and their batting average on balls in play was like 500, then we would be sitting here saying, yeah, okay, so this team's just kind of getting by the grace of whatever devil they sacrificed something to, and we're just going to wait for the other half of that horrible situation to come roaring back. But they're not. They have a very average batting average on balls in play. Like, they're just winning in a different way. That should be fine. I don't think it means they're totally incapable of winning how they used to, but they might just, that just may not be how they do it as often this year. Again, there will be more home runs, and I feel like, again, just like I think there'll be another rough patch in the weeks ahead, I think there's going to be a stretch of time where they are hitting the crap out of the ball, and it's just flying off the bat. The weather's even warmer than it is now, even though it's already disgustingly hot. I think that's still ahead for this team, and even if it's not, the possibility of it still being ahead is still very likely. So I'm not super concerned about this team's lack of power, as long as they keep winning games in a realistic way.
Let me ask you guys to give you one more other thing of note from this series that you guys found most interesting or delightful, and I'll give you one from Friday night, and that was one of the maybe the funnest play of the season, and that was the Bryson Stott bases clearing double, where you saw Nick Castellanos score and JT Realmuto score mere feet behind him in what was clearly harkens back to T-ball. The way they were running the bases together is kind of an interesting play. The way Bryson Stott hit the ball off the left center field wall, the center fielder looked like it was the first time he'd ever played out there. I mean, he started going back, and then he started drifting towards straight center field, and the ball just took off towards left, dozens of feet away from him. He's nowhere near it. So I think it confused Castellanos a little bit, because he's looking at the center fielder. The center fielder looks like he's tracking it. The ball goes a totally different place. And so they're right on top of each other. Realmuto reads it well. He's right on Nick Castellanos' rear end. So they send Castellanos, and Realmuto's like, I'm as close to him as a person can be. Let's see what happens. And both runs score. Realmuto gives Castellanos a tap on the butt when it's all done. And that, to me, showed, I don't know, that was a good sign. The fact that it was a blowout at that point was also a good sign that things were going to go better this weekend. But I like that play because it was fun, and I think we've talked a lot about how much more business-like the team seems to be this year, but that was a rollicking good time on Friday night and a great way to start off the series.
It was right out of Rookie of the Year, too. I mean, as soon as I saw that play, I could remember, I could recite the whole scene for you, with Henry Rowengartner looking at the ball and the guy behind him going, move it, and they both score within seconds of each other. And I just want to say, what other catcher in baseball could do that? Like, we complain about Real Muto, or at least I know I get frustrated with his hitting having sort of dipped, but he is still, I think, by far the most athletic catcher, at least in the National League, if not in all of baseball, because I don't think there are a lot of other catchers who could have done that. That's athleticism, baby.
Yeah. Well, give me, Justin, another moment from the weekend that you thought was significant or that you liked, or a performance, a player, something from the weekend that caught your attention.
Well, Otto Kemp definitely cooled off at the plate, but the highlights continued, even in just Friday games alone. In the City Connects, he made 3 defensive plays that were really impressive, making a leaping grab on a play in the 6th that the game was tied at that point, so that was key. He made that catch in foul territory, which was like the defensive equivalent of the Real Muto Castellanos play, because he had Bryson Stott and somebody else like right on his heels, and clearly they weren't communicating, and there were just like arms and gloves everywhere, and he managed to keep the presence of mind to actually make the catch, again, in a close game. He made a diving stop on a Juan Soto line drive at first base. And then later the weekend, they put him in left field, and he made his first put out there, too. He had a couple of RBIs, single, ground out. It was not like, offensive dynamo stuff. But, again, for the guy he's supposed to be, he's being that guy really well. And, again, filling in for Bryce Harper at first base, it's got layers, but expectations are different for Otto Kemp than they are for Bryce Harper, and I feel like he's met them. He's already met them, and anything else you get from him at this point is bonus time. I love it. I love when a guy can come up like that, play his role well, and Otto Kemp's been doing that.
Liz, what about you?
I think for me, we talked about it a little bit, but the Edmundo Sosa home run was great. He had a couple of other hits, I think, throughout the weekend. He looked decent defensively when they had him in there. It was nice to see him doing well. It was nice to see him being happy and excited because he himself had done something good. He's always a great guy in the dugout to celebrate other people. He's always right there, ready to celebrate. But it was nice to see him celebrate his own successes for a change. And I think it's something he's needed. I know on the radio broadcast recently, I think Kevin Stalker talked about, chatting with him about what it's like right now. Like, it's not even just that I'm doing badly, it's that I'm a role player and I don't have the chances. And I really have to be ready, and I have to figure out how to be ready. And it's not like he would have a different response at any other time. But it was encouraging to me to see him do that, to say that, and then have it actually come to fruition for him and see that, he's still good. That's one of those differences, I think, that between the Mets and the Phillies. Despite how Sosa had been doing, they do have like bench guys and role players that they can depend on. Otto Kemp, just as you were talking about, guys that you can put in. There is a decent chance that not just that they're going to do well, but they're going to make a difference in the game. So 3 cheers for Edmundo Sosa.
I want to run one more thing by you guys, but before we wrap up this series, I'm curious what your thoughts are of Mick Abel. We've seen him. He's had, I think, 6 starts now in the major league, something like that. We've seen him have a dominant start against Paul Skeens. He's had a couple of starts where he's pitched really well against some of these better offenses like the Cubs and the Mets. He's gotten hit around a little bit. And I'm curious, obviously he's going to stick in the starting rotation until Aaron Nola comes back, barring something unforeseen. And right now they're not expecting anything more from him than what you would expect from a number 5 starter. And I think we all agree. Mick Abel over Taijuan Walker in this starting rotation every day of the week and twice on Sunday.
Everyone's
but
nodding?
I am curious.
Yes, we are all nodding.
I think
cool. Just making sure.
I'll take a poll.
I'm nodding, Justin.
If we need to, and we can open it up to the Hittin season crowd and see if you would agree with that. But I think Mick Abel over Taijuan Walker. Hot take. I'll go on that. I'll climb on that wall. But as I watched him pitch on Saturday night, I was actually listening in the car on the way home and then caught the condensed game afterwards. He's got a lot of work to do. I think there's he's a guy who has lived off of a high 97, 98 mile an hour fastball up in the zone to use his curveball off of, so that and he's been kind of a two-pitch pitcher since he came to the big leagues with the high fastball and the curveball. And what we saw from the Mets and the Cubs is these guys just foul off the fastballs until they get one they like. And in this particular case on Saturday night, they just were crushing him over and over again. So Liz, I think that there are some pieces there, but I think what I'm finding out too is that he's far from a finished product, and that for a team that has playoff aspirations, when Aaron Nola's ready to come back, you definitely want Aaron Nola to be in there, and I think Andrew Painter has shown that he has more of a variety of an arsenal than Mick Abel does. Although I do like Mick Abel. I think he's got some good stuff. Do you see him in the bullpen when Aaron Nola comes back? What's his role? What's his role this year? What do you think?
I think after Nola comes back, it's important to send him down to the minors to rebuild a little bit. I don't know if he's lost his confidence, but to at least sort of get his legs under himself again. And I'm sure this will be an off-season project, but he needs another pitch in there if he's going to be really effective. He's just not going to be able to make it work with two. Especially, he can live on the fast stuff, but unlike the hitters in the minors, the hitters in the majors can handle it. And now that, there's a book out there on him, he's faced enough teams that, there's enough scouting for players to know. Just foul off those fast pitches until you see a big, juicy meatball right down the middle. It's not enough. And that makes me question whether or not he would be a good fit in the bullpen. Taijuan Walker, I'm not saying he should ever be in the starting rotation again. But I am saying, I don't know which one I would choose. Will you get away from the screen, Justin? Yeah, sure.
No, go ahead. I want to see where you're going with this.
After seeing in person Mick Abel give up back-to-back home runs, that was a difficult thing to swallow. So I don't know if he'd be a good fit in the bullpen. My hope is that whoever they get at the deadline will push Taijuan Walker out of the equation, and we never have to talk about him again.
First of all, the Mets lost while you were talking, and also,
Yes.
You can trade him. I think his best use at this point is being traded. You talk about bringing somebody in.
Well.
Yeah, they'll have to eat the rest of that contract, but at least now it's a little less than it was.
He's the biggest and best, I think, chance for them to make a trade. Or he's like the number one, prospect. He's just in that position where it's like, here's this young guy. He comes up. He's looked effective enough. You just hope from here on out he doesn't, get blown up enough to make people think he just doesn't have it. If he's a viable fifth or back of the rotation starter, somebody's going to want that, and Dombrowski's going to be able to make a deal out of that. I was trying to work out exactly which farmhands they would be most likely to trade, but then Matt Gelb was very helpful in a mailbag and just listed his 1, 2, and 3 on The Athletic of who he thinks, and Abel was number 1, Eduardo Tait was number 2, and Gene Cabrera was number 3. So already Abel's kind of he's kind of that guy who you trade in this scenario because he's proven he can pitch in the major leagues, and there's an Andrew Painter coming up behind him to sort of fill that role of new guy who is good and that extra gives you that extra juice. I've been very appreciative of what Mick Abel's been able to do, but as we said, Joe Ettinger called that on our Friday episode that Abel was very due for that moment where he just gets rocketed by a bunch of experienced big league hitters. And I think at this point you got to just assume he's probably in whatever deal is bringing these two guys the Phillies really need to the Phillies.
Keep forgetting that trading is a possibility. They can trade him and send him away and get things back for him. Yes, I agree with that.
Yeah, I sitting here, I think it's a lock. He's involved in a trade.
No, because who else are they going to send?
Yeah, and starting pitching is in such short supply. The only thing that can't happen is he can't have a bunch of blow up games. They got to be careful with that if they want to get something for him. So, but I have faith in Caleb Cottom. That he can get this kid to pitch well enough at the big league level, and get him working on other pitches that it would be viable. So, but he's not going anywhere until Aaron Nola comes back. I don't think, unless the deal's too good for Dave Dombrowski to pass up. They need him right now making those starts every fifth day. And this is the first time in his career Mick Abel has started every fifth day. In the minors, he wasn't starting every fifth day. So that's an adjustment that he has to kind of get used to as well. All right, let's wrap things up with All-Star voting. The All-Star voting has begun in Major League Baseball. There are no Phillies leading any of the categories. I don't think we're going to see Alec Boehm pacing the third base, although, all the criticism of Alec Boehm early aside, he is on a heater over these last 2 months and playing really terrific baseball. I mean, he's been what you would expect Alec Boehm to be, been very, very good. So no criticism of Alec Boehm, but they're not getting 9 All-Stars next year or 8 All-Stars or whatever it was. I'm curious though, who you guys think are the Phillies All-Stars? Which guys? I frame the question deserve to be at the All-Star game, and I'll leave it there, Justin, to start off with you. Which Phillies deserve to be at the All-Star game right now?
So Zach Wheeler is my answer. The problem is they just have this also lower tier, one level down from All-Star, of guys who are in this other pool. Schwarber was hitting like an All-Star. He dropped off. Though he still has the team leading home runs by far, he dropped off. Turner is hitting better than he has in years, but he needed a couple of weeks to really get going. Alec Boehm and Brandon Marsh, they're both hitting well over 300, but only since the start of May. They both had, slower months to start the season. Marsh especially, famously so, was not hitting at all for a very long time. But that was the beginning of May was when a couple of guys really turned this on, hitting and pitching-wise. Jesus Luzardo toppled a lot of his own high standings and stat columns with those 2 rough starts. I think he still deserves it, but All-Stars are largely determined by these couple of weeks of work, so things get really influenced by that, and he dropped down so far that people aren't seeing his name as high on lists anymore. And if you're outside of Philly circles or people who watch him regularly, you're not going to feel like, okay, well, he's getting it back and he's dominant again. Ranger Suarez has pitched like an all-star in a couple of starts, but he got started late. And I do want to give somebody else who fits into that category his flowers, though, because it's been absolutely incredible and not really discussed in a loud way. But Orion Kerkering was off to a real rough start this year. Since May 1st, his ERA is 0.47. He has allowed 11 hits and 11 walks. He has allowed 1 earned run.
Wow.
So he has gotten into plenty of trouble. He has gotten out of it. And that's through 21 games, so it's not a small sample size. So what I'm saying is, as far as potential, frontline starters, Zach Wheeler is, I think, your best bet. But the Phillies are very rich in guys who are in this pool of adequate backups, where if 1 to 3 guys ahead of them get hurt or can't play or need rest or whatever, the Phillies have a bunch of guys who would not be crazy slip in that way. I'll even throw Nick Castellanos in there. He has been very steady offensively. He's been basically a 280 hitter all year. I mean, that's fantastic. And, obviously his defense has come under scrutiny, but he's got numbers that it would not be crazy to see him, slip in there because of a bunch of, it would probably take a few more, but because of a bunch of snafus, Nick Castellanos gets to be there. I don't know. I mean, that's just the level of guys they have. And honestly, it's cool to see a bunch of guys from your team go to the All-Star game, and ultimately I hope there's a couple of Phillies there. But this is also indicative of how this team has been just more effective in a more stretched out way. They haven't all been great all the time. No one's really surged ahead of anyone else except Schwarber and home runs, but they've all had really hot extended periods of time, and that's really good, even if they're not going to be on the All-Star team.
All right, Liz, same question to you. Which Phillies are deserving of a spot on the All-Star team right now?
I think Justin named all of the Phillies.
He did name all of the Phillies on the roster.
All of the Phillies.
Yep. Otto Kemp is making some noise now.
My choices before he started talking were Jesus Luzardo, because he had those 2 bad starts, which destroyed
his ERA.
And that's still what a lot of people look at to determine, are you worthy of the All-Star game? I mean, we're talking, it rose by more than 2 entire runs, and he's going to spend the rest of the season trying to peel that down, but he's already done a great job. His current ERA is 4.08. It's almost under 4. And I think once he gets under that, people will stop being looking him with open mouth. Oh God, what happened? Orion Kerkering.
Well, I'm sorry, but 20 earned runs in 2 games. Oh God, what happened is the appropriate response to that.
Exactly,
right.
I'm saying, but now it's far enough in the past that it's not an immediate thing. But Orion Kerkering, seeing him getting some of the saves, seeing Thompson stray from his normal routine with closers, and seeing him sort of slowly start to come into the role, that has been, to me, one of the most impressive things, because I was really demoralized when he had that rough start. I was really annoyed and upset about that, because we saw them get rid of Jeff Hoffman last year and not really get a lot of replacements. And I was like, if Kerkering doesn't work out, Matt Strom is also having problems. Where does that leave us? But Kerkering getting better and improving over time has created less panic, I think, for me, about the bullpen. And seeing him sort of come into his own is great. We were all wondering, like, who is he? What is his role going to be? What type of guy in the bullpen is he going to be? And now, we're into, year 2.5 or something with him, we sort of know. Like, seeing him hit, 99 on the gun is exciting.
I wish I had more confidence at this point. I still am lacking confidence in Orion Kerkering, and really, I don't really feel confident in anybody in the Phillies bullpen, although I think most of the time they will get the job done. But I just don't feel like any one of those guys, because Orion Kerkering does have some walk issues that he needs to kind of work through. He's dancing in between a lot of raindrops. Matt Strom is kind of the same way, and Jordan Romano is kind of the same way. They're getting the job done far more often than not of late, and I think they're a pretty good trio. So that when the Phillies do make some additions at the trade deadline, those three guys, along with whoever else they get, could form a very good bullpen, and everybody kind of gets a role they're more suited for moving down the pike. That being said, I don't think anybody in the bullpen right now, despite the numbers you just said from Kerkering, I don't think they rise to the level of a National League All-Star right now. I think Zach Wheeler is an All-Star. I think Kyle Schwarber is an All-Star, third in the National League in home runs. I think he'll make it as a DH.
Do you think he'll play in the home run derby?
Could be in the home run derby. That could be a whole lot of fun.
I prefer it when they have someone in the home run derby.
Yeah, that would be good. I'd like to see that.
Bones said he would do it again.
Yeah.
I'd love it. Listen.
Okay. No, I'll take it. I like
he
it.
enjoyed it. And listen, baseball's for having fun. It's not just for making your money. Go and have fun at the All-Star game, the mandated period of time where MLB has decided that the players get to have fun.
Yeah, that's all right. Everybody gets a day. So I think you got Wheeler. I think you got Schwarber. Bryce Harper is that wild card, man. I mean, he's not going to get. I don't think he's going to get voted in at first base, but he could. He could get voted in at first base. He'd have to make a comeback here, and he's missed some time. But he's a star, so you never know. But I don't think he makes the All-Star team. And I think you're really looking at Trey Turner. Absolutely, is having an All-Star season. There are so many great National League shortstops. I don't know if he's able to nose ahead of Ellie De La Cruz, Francisco Lindor. Who else am I thinking of? Is Mookie Betts playing shortstop still?
No, he's played second.
Center. Yeah, okay.
I know those two guys you just mentioned are so much more exciting than Trey Turner, just on the surface.
And there's another 2 or 3 guys that are also that I'm just blanking on off the top of my head right now.
I'm just thinking of AL shortstops because they're also rich in shortstops.
Yeah.
It's just, I think he should, he's deserving of an All-Star nod, but I don't think Turner will get an All-Star nod simply because I think there's such a high number of players. So it's going to come down to the starters. Which of these starters get in? I don't think it'll be Luzardo. I think the ERA does kill his chances, and that's a real shame because I think he's pitched the best out of the 3 left-handed starters the Phillies have had for the entire season. I think Christopher Sanchez absolutely deserves an All-Star nod, his second in a row. And I think the big question mark is Ranger Suarez. He missed the first month, but he's got another maybe 5 or 6 starts before the All-Star break. If he continues to pitch like this for the next 5 or 6 starts, he's going to have an ERA around 2. I'm not sure how you don't put him on the All-Star team, as dominant as he has been. So, again, I don't think the Phillies get any more than probably 3 All-Stars. You can't have all of those different guys, but I think you can make an argument for all the guys we just mentioned.
Yeah, and I will say that this is an age of shortstops. So to your point about Trey Turner, he is top in a lot of National League categories, even among just shortstops. But like when you look at Jacob Wilson, Jeremy Pena, J.P. Crawford's playing really well this year in Seattle. Bobby Witt, Gunnar Henderson, and Bo Bichette is also having like a bit of a comeback. That's like 7 shortstops in the American League alone, and Trey Turner's the only NL shortstop who's like up with them in a lot of stats. So like that's a good sign. But you're right, with like Lindor and C.J. Abrams in Washington and Ellie De La Cruz and even like Xander Bogaerts. Like there's some competition in the National League, but hey, Turner's having he's having the best year, at least to start, that he's had as a member of the Phillies. That I hope is enough, to get him in there.
In terms of the fan vote right now, Lindor leads among shortstops at 1.6 million. Mookie Betts is playing shortstop. He is. I thought I remembered him moving. He's at 1.2 million. Ellie De La Cruz is just ahead of Trey Turner, 689 to 661,000. So it's possible Turner moves up to number 3, but he's not gonna move ahead of Lindor or Betts. And right now, I think Ellie De La Cruz is more deserving of an all-star nod. All 3 of those guys are probably ahead in the pecking order over Trey Turner, and that's okay. Those 3 guys are amazing players, and
the All-Star
truly
game isn't the end-all be-all.
Right, exactly.
It's something we all complain about and mostly skip.
We should spend more time on a future podcast talking about the season Trey Turner is having, because this is the kind of season I think we were all hoping to see from him.
Yeah.
When he first signed a few years ago. Like he's doing everything we wanted him to do at the start of the season. So we should get into that more on a future episode. But we're an hour in, so let's wrap things up for everyone. And let's go to some final thoughts. Justin, any final thoughts for you as we finish things off here?
Had a great time at the Hittin Season Tailgate. We'll be doing another one later this season. A date is TBD, and you'll hear about it. And we will be thrilled to see you back out there in the parking lot outside the Phillies Stadium for another fun time. Thank you to everybody who let us ask them some questions or even just came by for the free beer. We really appreciate it.
We do appreciate you drinking the free beer that was provided from the good folks at WHYY. It was
and New Trail.
New Trail beer sponsored us. Thank you, New Trail.
Yes, thank you very much. It was great stuff. Liz, final thoughts.
I didn't get a chance to comment on the City Connects at the beginning of the episode, so I just want to say, at the game on Saturday, my husband and I went into the team store, and it had been rearranged for the 8 billionth time. And we wondered, after we saw like the kids section and the women's and the men's clothes and the custom jerseys all on the main floor, what in God's name is upstairs? So you walk up the stairs and you get there, and it's like a big top of blue tinged depression, because it's just it's nothing but City Connect everywhere, and like just a whole wall of them. And I was like, man, I really hate these jerseys. I really hate them. So that's my opinion on them. And go ahead, Justin.
Well, all I'm going to say is the best Phillies gear isn't in that team store, honestly.
No.
The best Phillies gear, in my opinion, is from the litany of local artists who are making stuff that is just so cool and individual.
Strong
and
agree.
Any tailgate. I was wearing a shirt at our last tailgate that was a Trey Turner shirt that was from an artist that a friend of mine knew personally, who I met at a previous tailgate. So that kind of stuff is, in my opinion, at this point, way cooler than anything you're gonna find in there. Like this shirt I'm wearing now, which gets into like sort of Fanatic lore. If you see, it's kind of like if the Fanatics.
Fanatic gets a P. Yeah,
That's great.
that's great.
What does it mean? I don't know.
know.
But it's in my opinion that's where the best stuff
Yeah.
is.
And I have one more thing to say. I'm going to be in Dallas later this week with the Society for American Baseball Research. It is our yearly convention. If you're going to be down there, if you're listening to this and you're going to be down there, shoot me a message on Blue Sky, and I would love to meet up with you. And if you're not going to be there, please join Saber. It's a lovely, wonderful organization. You get a bunch of free stuff, free baseball journals, and access to incredible history books. And there's local chapters all across the country. Please think of joining. We are in the middle of a membership drive. Saber.org, SABR.org.
I was going to ask you where to send people. Saber.org. That's SABR.org, everybody. All right, Brad, that's going to do it for this edition of Hittin' Season. And again, yes, thank you all for everyone who came out to the Hittin' Season tailgate. We're looking forward to the next one. In the meantime, if you want to be a part of the show, don't be shy. Email us, hittinseason@billypenn.com. You can send in questions. You can send in comments. You can record a voice memo on your phone and send it in to us, and we'll play it on the show and react. And if you have any questions, you can do it that way. Also, want to please tell your friends and family members about the Hittin' Season podcast. We've got a Hittin' Season YouTube channel, so you could subscribe to that, and you can watch all of our roundtable editions of the podcast and clips of the show there as well. You can also subscribe to us on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts. Tell your friends about the future 2025 World Series champions. Get them listening right now in first place by 1.5 games on the Mets, who lost to the Braves here on Monday night. Good times here in the city of Philadelphia. Thanks, everyone, for listening. We'll talk to you next time right here on Hittin' Season.